Hello, and welcome to this command tutorial. This is a different kind of video than I have normally done in the past, but we'll see if you guys like it, and it might become a series. So I wanted to show off this very cool feature that I discovered a little while back, and thought I would make a video on it. It has to do with the TPS of a server, and discovering it and then changing it. TPS is ticks per second. The game runs on what are called game ticks, which is the amount of time that the world knows to run through all of what it does. So that's when it calculates things like movement, or block placing, or breaking, when you switch a redstone lever. A redstone tick is 2 game ticks, so we can visualize that here with 5 2-tick repeaters. That's a total of 20 game ticks, so one of those, that whole line should last for exactly 1 second. But one of the very difficult things about Bedrock Edition is that we don't have much of a way to test that without external clients, and even then they're not incredible. So I set out to try and find a way to calculate TPS using just command blocks, and this little system does it with a generally pretty high success rate. You have to do it in a very exact way, and so sometimes I fail to do so. But for the most part, we should see 20. There you go. Which would make sense. This world should be running at about 20 TPS right now. So if I flip this little lever that I have here and try again, we should notice a little bit of a difference in the score that we get. So yeah, and we can also see that over here with the redstone ticks. Things are a little bit slower than they were before. Real quick, one of the interesting things about Bedrock Edition is that when you depress the TPS, player movement is still what's called client-side. And so instead of being server-side, which is where the game ticks are actually processed, client-side things, such as player movement, are sent as packets to the server. But what that means is that there's no in-game checks to see if how your movement is affected by the server's TPS. So you can move perfectly fine with no matter how the TPS is. You won't even see frame drops because that's just on your client side. And so what that means is that the distance traveled here, which is about 4 blocks, the distances in the command blocks change about the actual distance, but that distance that's traveled when walking is the player's walking speed over 1 second. So we're able to test for 1 second of real-life time in-game no matter what the TPS is. And then we simply just test for how long it takes the player to go from one end to the other end, and that's our timer. So the way this machine works is that this little button here is going to teleport you right to the block above, and then just facing in the right way. So this makes sure that you're aligned perfectly correctly so that it will take exactly 1 second. Then, when you walk over this block, it's testing for an entity within 0.8 blocks of this area. So that's why I have this trapdoor here, so I don't accidentally set it off by going to the side. But as soon as you walk on it, it triggers that command, which will set this block right here from stone to redstone. Now at the end here, we have this receiving command, which is testing for an entity within 1.5 blocks of this structure. So that would be like right about there. And if so, it's going to set this block back to stone, so deactivating the machine. Now, what this command here does is, whenever this block is a redstone dust, because it needs redstone here, then it's going to add tick test timer 1. So here we have on the side a scoreboard that is just called timer, and we have a set one with 20. The way we'd add that is /scoreboard players add, and then we're going to say 20 as a timer, and we'll set that to 20, which is what you would want it to be. I already have it there, so I'm not going to run it again. And then we have tick test here, which is the player that's going to be gaining the points from this command here. Then next to it, we have this command, which is just a backup in case if I just decide to start it and then don't finish it. If it hits 24, which wouldn't really be possible on a normal vanilla world, then it'll just cancel it. So what this timer does is it looks at 20 and it looks at the tick test, and if tick test gets greater than the 20, it cancels it and sets this block back to stone. Now, this last part here, the redstone torch, is just detecting for when it turns off, and so that's how we get our message here with the tellraw command. I currently have the tag admin, but you could just run @a. It just tells everyone based off of the selector, which is @p, which is me, so whoever's closest to this command block, and then says they ran a tick test, and then what the tick timer is, and then this one just resets the tick test timer back down to 0. So what we're doing in the whole of this is we turn this block to redstone, and then we turn it back to stone, and while it's redstone, it adds points to this tick test once every tick, because it's a repeat always active command block, so it activates every tick. And so each tick is adding 1, so we're just looking at how many ticks it takes for me to get from here to here, which will take exactly 1 second no matter what, so we're just looking at how many ticks are in 1 second. Moving on to the second part of this video, this is based off of the TPS suppressor mods in Java Edition, which allow you to control what your game's tick speed is. And they're very, very simple, just 2 command blocks. Beforehand, it should be noted, it's kind of janky, it doesn't work super well, and it's very specific to how powerful your server is, so you'd have to adjust it while you'd be doing it. It's not really a permanent option. As I've already seen while testing this, it's inconsistent, so I have one number saved as a certain TPS, and in actuality, it changes as I relog. But while in the moment, if you need to test like a farm or something, you can control and limit how fast the ticks go. And the way we do that is simply just by overloading each tick. This is a system, I'll call it execution splitting. And what that means is that this execution splitting is going to cause something to execute multiple times within the same tick. So what we're doing here is we're executing as all entities, C equals 2, so count equals 2, so a maximum of 2 entities, we're selecting them, and then from each of those entities, we're selecting 2, and then from each of those 4 entities, we're selecting 2 more, so now we have 8, and so on, and this is an exponential effect, a 2 to the x power, and it will keep going, and then when we have the full number of entities that it's executing on, we're going to summon an armor stand called tick overload right on top of here. And then right above it, in the same tick later on, we're going to kill all armor stands, name equals tick overload. So what we're doing is we're summoning and then immediately killing armor stands. So that's why this thing won't cause any lag within your world or any visible lag to the player, because the entities never really existed as far as the game's concerned. It's all processed within the command section of the each game tick. But what it's doing is it's lengthening what each tick does, because in every tick, even though the overall thing is that you don't see anything happen, each tick it's summoning the entities and then killing them. So we're expanding every tick. And that's what we do for each one. We just change the number of entities that we're executing on. I'll go over what I have for each command. This is what I have for 8 ticks. Here is 6 ticks. Here is 4 ticks. And here is 2 ticks. You see that I'm just stacking it. And then the top command will always be the same. It's just kill all entities. Type equals armor stand, name equals tick overload, with a chain always active. Here you see that for 12 TPS, I've done 256 entities that will be summoning every tick and then killing. For 8, I have 384. 6 is 512. 4 is 768, and when I want 2 ticks, or 2 TPS, it would be 1,024 entities per second. But this, of course, would be changed. You'd have to kind of fiddle around with it within your own world. So to give an example, here's the 12 again, and I'm going to run it. You see that the icon in the corner starts to flick a little bit because the ticks are running more slowly. And we run the test. 8, it says that time. I might have ran it incorrectly. It should be noted that this TPS test machine requires you to immediately press forward and keep going forward until you hit the wall. I am not very good at it. It's either a mobile thing or some inconsistency with the way I hold down my thumb. But yeah, it should be more consistent for anyone who has a button that does it that's not on the screen. There we go, yeah, so we're getting 10 rather consistently now. That's not what I had saved, but this is a good example of how it changes world to world, or as the world files reassemble to try and take up less space. So for the sake of things, we're just going to try, let's say, 6. Alright, it seems like we're more getting 4 ticks, so it compressed in a different direction. This, again, shows the inconsistencies of this method, but as long as you do it within the same session, so you don't relog beforehand, it should still be just as effective. Yeah, so we're getting about 4 ticks TPS right now. And we can also test that over here with the redstone repeaters. And if we're at 4 TPS, we should be seeing 2 redstone ticks be a second. So one of these should move about every 1 second. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and yeah, so that's about what we're seeing. So it seems like we've got just about 4 TPS. And the last thing I want to do is just show you what happens when you compress the TPS. Things behave very interestingly. Sorry, I'm still trying to figure out how this new menu works. So if we get some entities and a bow, and then maybe some blocks, you can see that the placing blocks is mostly just the same. Nothing super different except for the sound gets slightly delayed. However, breaking blocks is very, very weird. It's kind of what you see when your world gets super laggy. Things update all at once after a wait time. And you'll see that entities spawning in will be slower, and they move, but they do so very, very, very slowly. And we might see that if we try and hit them too. Things register very slowly. You see things come into my hotbar, so the creative menu also moves very slowly. And I hit, and then a bit later it registers. This is another show of the client-server disconnect, is that I hit the ground perfectly fine, and then the server updates to see what happened to the husks. It's very interesting to see what happens to arrows. They still travel pretty much the exact same distance that they would otherwise, but they do so very slowly, which makes testing for where the arc is very, very easy. You can see exactly how things behave, because you can, again, you're completely unimpeded. You see, even though the server is moving at a snail pace, right now I have almost no frame drops. I've got a few when I come into this area, but that's probably just all of the entities and number visualizations that I have. But I'd say as these methods would go, this one's pretty good with how it affects the players, so you can still move around and interact with the world how you normally would, but you can observe how things happen in slow motion. I guess the very last thing that I would like to show you is how falling entities behave, because I think this is fascinating. You should all feel free to try and test this out in your own worlds, and just have some fun with how the game behaves at really slow TPSs. Fun every time. Well, that'll be all for this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope this comes in handy when developing anything from farms and redstone to really anything else that you might be testing in the creative. And thanks for watching.